All right, and welcome to Now This Is Podcasting. I'm your host, Connor, and I'm here as always with Calvin.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And we have McKinnon on as a guest again.
What's up?
And we have a new guest. We're very excited to have Katya on the show today.
Hello.
And go ahead and give us a little background. What was your film journey like?
Yeah, my film journey. So I grew up without a television, and I am almost the same age as you guys. So we just didn't have one. My parents sent us outside a lot. Anything we had was a recorded VHS of Wishbone from our grandma.
Ooh,
Oh my God, I love Wishbone.
that's a good one. We got to do a review for that.
Oh my God.
We love
great.
the Odyssey.
Yeah.
The Wishbone Odyssey.
Oh my God. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. I haven't thought about Wishbone in forever.
I know. So that's what I have, tidbits. I have tidbits of history and reference.
And culture.
Well, luckily they did show us interesting movies, like their anniversary movie, Dr. Zhivago, which is a lot of snow and Russians. That was good.
Those are two important archetypes. Yeah, the snow and the Russians.
Snowy Russians. Yeah, and then we watched a lot of dancing movies. We were all sisters, so we rent the same movies from the movie store over and over and over again. So that was really the extent of my movie experience. I kind of wrote it off until I got into college, and I'd be in a room and not really understand what people were talking about, not get the jokes. So I watched The Office, and then I watched Parks and Rec. I watched all the shows. And then I really only started getting into movies recently when Calvin came along. And
Right.
that meant hanging out with Calvin was watching movies.
You make a face like, oh no.
We do other things too, but
I definitely thought it was kind of like if you're going to be stuck with Calvin having to watch all these movies, might as well come on and talk about them too.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
I really like having you on. I think it'll be
Yeah.
great at a new perspective because it's gotten really stale having Calvin around.
well, it's cool. It's always cool to think a little bit more because when you just see you're watching just fun movies all the time, and then even thinking about fun movies is cool. It's a cool thought exercise to do. It makes you really see that there's more value than you might expect.
Right. So we're going to be talking about Turning Red today. This is the new Disney Plus movie done by Pixar. It's directed by Domee Shi. It was also she wrote it along with Julia Cho. It had a budget of $175 million. It's made $4 million. That's all international box office because it was only put on streaming here in the States. So
Which is so strange.
I was shocked when we had talked about doing this movie. I was like, oh yeah, I'll find the tickets. And Hannah told me, she's like, it's just on Disney Plus. That's the only place you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say I wasn't expecting a ton out of this. I think the previous two Pixar movies to come out on Disney Plus, I wasn't I was not impressed by. What
was before Luca?
Raya.
Soul.
Raya.
Well, Raya also came out in theaters. That's also not Pixar. That's Disney. I mean, just specifically to the
I
studio.
thought it was straight to Disney.
No, I mean, but like Pixar, the studio,
Sure.
didn't do
Yeah.
Raya. But yeah, I wasn't impressed with Soul. And
Really?
Luca. No, I
Maybe
didn't
we
care
should do
for it.
Soul then, because Soul is great.
I don't want to talk about Soul either. I didn't like
You
that
don't
movie.
need. You don't need to.
So I'll just say that my expectations for this weren't too high. I thought initially May is super annoying, and I was glad it toned down throughout the movie. It ended up having a real message that developed throughout the story, and I ended up appreciating this movie a lot more than I was expecting. So McKinnon, what are your first impressions of Turning Red?
Yeah, I went into this movie with a pretty low bar, I think, also. And I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this movie, I think. There were quite a few funny bits that I didn't expect to laugh as much as I did, so I appreciated that. But yeah, no, I went in with a low bar, so it was kind of difficult to have
An accurate opinion on it.
Yeah. So maybe I need to rewatch this movie a couple times, but the first time around I was pleasantly surprised.
I agree with you. Katya, what did you think of this one?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I didn't know much about it going into it. I think I looked it up right before watching it, and then I watched it. And I liked the main character. I liked how kind of in your face she was at the beginning.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that part.
As being the only one of us who was ever a teen girl,
Yeah.
did this movie, did you identify with any part of it? I watched it with Hannah, and she told me, she was like, this takes me right back to middle school.
Yeah, for sure. I think it did in a lot of ways, just with her friend groups and, what's important, and then trying to care about things that you either do care about or don't quite care about yet. But then all of a sudden, she's like, oh, now I care about boys. So that was interesting. And the idea of giving off this perception of yourself that you're like, this is who I am right now. You have to say, this is who I am. because you're not sure yet.
Right.
So you have to tell people and express it. So that's why I liked that part.
You were also telling us that you really you enjoyed the aspects about the movie with the boy bands, and you love the boy bands of like that era. Can you give us like your favorite boy bands?
I probably listened to more Backstreet Boys than anyone in this room. I love Backstreet Boys growing up.
Yeah, because I also, growing up without a TV, I also didn't have internet.
You also didn't grow up with the radio.
I grew up in such a small town. We had like NPR and like country.
Right.
And that was it.
We definitely listened to a lot of Radio Disney growing up. So I was aware of the boy bands for sure.
Aaron Carter and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, I loved Aaron Carter.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Calvin, what do you think of Turning Red?
So yeah, my first impression coming into this was I had heard really good things about it, that it was one of the most inventive Pixar stories since Inside Out, and I was like, obviously, like straight away, I was like, well, I disagree with that.
Yeah, because you're not a big Inside Out fan. Go listen to our review of Inside Out.
Yeah. I've heard from multiple people like I had a decent opinion of you before I listened to that.
That's the one that my brother went off on in the comments saying, "You don't know what you're talking about."
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, Calvin sounds so full of himself. Like he's the only one that understands the movie."
I thought you had great points.
I hope so. I haven't listened to it again, so I haven't done it. I haven't experienced it in third person. But yeah, I do. I don't think that Inside Out is very inventive. I think it spends a lot of time on the wrong things. I think this is Inside Out. I think this was what Inside Out should be. It focused on the girl and her emotions in a lot more relatable way. So this is a much better version of Inside Out.
I actually tend to agree with that. It feels like you could mash the two movies together, and you could have, part one is the emotions living in her head, and then part two is the your external story with May. And so I actually like that idea. I think that it makes sense. I think you could see it as a telling the same story, but from the two different perspectives. So I like that. I like that interpretation. I think it's a good idea. I also like this movie a lot I enjoy anything that removes really stupid stigmas. And this movie obviously deals with, a girl's first period. And that's just a topic that for some reason it always grosses out men. Like they don't want to go buy their girlfriend's tampons or something like that. Or you get a lot of images of like clueless dads who don't know what to do. And it feels like it's a trope in like sitcoms and stuff like this. Like just the idea that it's not something that we can talk about and realize is just a biological function and then handle it is really silly to me. And I think part of that comes from like my background in like healthcare and being in a healthcare major and stuff like that. So it's a topic that I'm aware of. And I just like the idea of breaking down silly stigmas. So I think this movie is really helpful for that. And it's also not the point. I've heard it talked about as this is just a movie about a period. And it's not.
Or puberty.
Right.
People keep saying, oh, it's such a great metaphor for puberty. No, it's not a metaphor for puberty. It is so much more than that. So I think if you're looking at it like that, you're really limiting the scope of what the message is of this movie.
Yeah, I agree. It's a shallow take to be like, that's all it is. That the panda just represents the change this girl's going through. And I think it's so much more than that.
Yeah, and I love that she's like, no, Mom, it's not that. I'm a panda.
Yeah.
Like, I'm actually a panda.
Yeah, has the red peony bloomed?
That was so funny. That was a good line.
So the first question I want to ask is, what do you guys think about the anime influence on the animation? I think of all the Pixar movies I've watched recently, it feels like the biggest departure from kind of the style that they usually go for. I thought it fit in pretty well, especially it ramps up a lot in the third act. And I thought it fit in really well. What do you guys think of that influence?
Yeah, I felt like it was really obvious from someone who's watched a lot of anime before. Just all of the facial expressions, especially like when she makes that weird face where like she sticks out her teeth and like the bottoms of her eyelids squint up.
Right.
When she's drawing Devin underneath the bed. I was like, oh my god, that is like. That whole scene is amazing.
That's one of my favorite scenes too. I thought it was really funny, and then it's also like you see this like progression in the character too. I thought it was really great.
Yeah, and the director has talked multiple times about how like I just felt like we should include like a horny girl like in a kids movie. It's like that's like because everybody there are horny girls, they do exist, and we do definitely draw boys like that.
Yeah, I love the mom's reaction. She's like, what is this? Just a shock on her face. I thought it really like for a movie that has like these really fantastic elements, parts of it felt really grounded in how like the interactions between mother and daughter. I thought it was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but absolutely, like, I cannot imagine my mom doing that. I don't like
Going through your notebook.
No, taking it into the store and showing the boy that I had a crush on all of these pictures and then telling him that he, molested you or like, stay away from my daughter. He had no idea that she even existed.
And then talking to you about it like she did you a favor.
Yeah, yeah. And Malin's just like, oh my God, no one was ever supposed to see those things.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
Her mother's like, thank God I saved you. Like,
Yeah.
it is mortifying. But I think that's part of the point of this movie is it's that the director had said she wanted to tell a story that showed the conflict that she had growing up with her own mother. She felt like they were just arguing all the time and they weren't understanding each other. And so I think having a scene like that where it's clearly the mother's taking it in the completely wrong context and May is just mortified by what's going on in front of her. And I think that's spelled out the story that the director wanted to have.
Yeah.
Right.
For
But
sure.
and then like on the subject of the anime influences, like there are so many like little details of like they anthropomorphize. Oh, not anthropomorphize isn't the right word, but like they have like sound effect like little stars and blurbs,
Right.
which are really really strange to see in a Pixar movie because obviously that's just it was the limits of 3D animation for a long time prohibited that type of animation. And that kind of style. Pixar had a very specific style. So seeing the traditional Pixar style blended with, I'd argue that the second, probably the biggest animation style out there right now in Japanese anime was a really cool blend. Like there's so much attention to detail here in being true to both aesthetics.
Right.
I think it's a cool blend, but I get turned off when they do those like crazy eyes.
Yeah.
Like,
The sparkly
sparkly eyes?
yeah, the like
googly
sparkly
eyes.
eyes.
Oh, those are
or,
so
like,
cute, though.
I think they're disturbing. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I understand the aesthetic and that it's just kind of built into that look. It always is off-putting to me.
Do you find it disturbing in an anime also, or just in this context?
well, I don't watch a lot of anime,
Okay.
so I
Yeah,
think
well,
I've
that's
just
the next
found
part
that-
of her journey.
my journey. I've never really gotten into it, but I think I work with a lot of kids, and I think it's always interesting too, just to watch them do the faces that they see in these shows. Like they'll watch Disney and then they'll do the faces.
They'll pour glitter in their eyes and try to recreate it.
No, but they'll do the big like I'm gonna spread my eyes open and like stick my head out and like beg you. Like they do that, and they'll copy even the same thing with human actors as well. They'll do these like little no you didn't kind of thing. Like, that's
Everyone
not
who's
you.
just listening
Right.
to the podcast knows exactly what you just said.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll do it. So
Yeah, I thought the anime elements were incorporated well. Like I like the eyes thing. I think that's a really cute thing in anime. What I didn't like was some of the characters' movements. Like one of Mei Lin's friends, the purple one, her movements.
We don't even have names for
I don't care about their names.
Abby, right?
They're not important. Abby, yeah.
Yeah, the Korean one.
I don't think they're important. So yeah, I don't know their names. But her movements reminded me of the NPCs in the Fix It Felix game in Wreck-It Ralph. Like they're very like
That is
robotic
a deep
with her-
cut I have.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm staring right at Calvin like he's gonna know what I'm talking about.
It's sort of like jittery movement.
It's jittery. It's sort
moving
of
from
robotic.
pose to pose.
Yeah.
it almost feels like Family Guy influences on the way
Sure,
that
yeah.
Pixar characters have started to move in like these really abrupt changes. They're not so smooth anymore.
Which
I
like
agree.
I think Mei Lin is a very smooth moving character, but that friend of hers in particular was very jittery, which was weird to me.
I thought she was hilarious though,
yeah,
Abby.
more like
I think she was the most
personality.
annoying character
Yeah,
in the
she's my
whole
least
movie.
favorite character.
I
as
knew
well.
it
Yeah.
was going to be a very hard split because she was over the top.
Right.
And I just felt like it was a refreshing over the top though.
I don't
Right.
think being over the top is enough. She's just everything else about her was annoying.
I just loved how like the more excited she got, the smaller her eyes got. I thought
Yeah.
that was funny.
Yeah. The other thing about the other thing I noticed about the characters were their mouths. They didn't smile or frown as much as I would have thought. They usually showed expression with their eyebrows, and their mouths were just wide open, so they were just all teeth. That's what I saw.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, there were a lot of teeth.
Yeah, like Mei Lin's character, I don't think that she smiles or frowns that much. The characters just show a lot of emotion through their eyebrows. That's what I picked up.
No, that's a neat way to be expressive because I think you usually you're concentrated on like what is going on in their entire face, but if
Right.
part of it is kind of held in suspense and then you have to rely on other cues to
Sure.
figure out what's going on with the character.
Which is probably a bit anime, because characters in anime usually have like very wide mouths. Like,
Yeah.
they're all teeth usually.
Well, it seems like also it's the eyes are used a ton to
Yeah.
tell the mood of a character in an anime. Mm-hmm. I also really liked, like I said, it ramps up kind of that anime feel in like that final battle and everything. I
It's
love
so anime.
like all the speed lines and everything like that. I thought it was all incorporated well, and you had a build to it, so it felt like it made sense when it was ramped up at the end. So I like the aesthetic of this. It was interesting, and it was a departure from what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like it's so nice that they focused on that. Like, this isn't overly fantastical, like Onward, where everything is magical and made up. Whereas here, this is just Toronto,
Right.
And I feel like that's easy. Like, okay, here's Toronto. Now let's focus on all of these really intricate details and build to something as an aesthetic choice, rather than recreating, like Coco is an entire world.
Right.
And you're not going to you can see some of the details, but you're not going to get caught up in the details the same way, because it's a completely novel experience to see a floating city for the afterlife,
Right.
versus seeing just like, this isn't just another city. It's Toronto specifically, but it's still a city. And most people have an awareness of what cities are going to look like.
I actually like that it was in Toronto. We get some movies that are just set in middle of nowhere America.
Yeah.
And so to see it like, oh, this is a Toronto movie, I thought that was cool. I want to move on to the fourth wall breaking that May does. It's really prevalent at the beginning and then at the end, and then it really falls off for the rest of the movie. My thought on that is, if you're going to use breaking the fourth wall as a narrative tool, it needs to be continuous throughout the film. It needs to be an aspect of the character. It can't just be kind of an exposition dump or a way to explain the world you're in, explain the characters you're going to be interacting with. I think, while I don't really love Deadpool, him breaking the
Yeah.
fourth wall is like an integral element of his character, and so it can't start and then end and then pick up again. It has to be something that goes on throughout that movie. I think if you're going to use it as a narrative tool, it needs to function throughout. And if you're not doing that, then it's lazy writing. It's just a way to have a bit of exposition in a fun way. When it falls off, it feels like you couldn't come up with a clever enough way to just tell the story outright. So you needed to have fourth wall breaking just for the sake of it, I think. What did you guys think of breaking the fourth wall at the beginning and end?
I think that it makes sense in Deadpool because there's not much pacing going on in that movie. But for this movie, if there was fourth wall breaking, it would halt the pace of it. So I wish that there was just none in this movie.
I agree. I just think they need to not have it at all. You need to write the beginning and the end in a better way then.
Right. Well, I just mean, to your point, if they sprinkled it in here and there to be more consistent, I feel like it would halt whatever momentum there was in a given scene. If they were like, "That's me on my bed. I'm drawing boys in my diary.
Yeah.
Don't mind me," or whatever. I think it would kind of clash with what any given scene is trying to do if they had not voice over, because it's Malin talking to you, but it's kind of a version of voiceover.
Well, and my other issue is there is internal monologues that she has. So then just have the beginning be that and don't break the fourth wall at all. At least,
Sure.
because then you're staying consistent in the way you're telling your story.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of the fourth wall breaking?
When I watched it, I didn't notice it or have a problem with it. I actually don't remember what she did at the end, so I just remember the beginning intro. And like I said earlier, I liked it because it felt like that setup, like, this is who I am, this is how it works. And I liked that for her character specifically, because it's going to change.
Right.
Like, it's going to get more detailed.
I'm not knocking using that as a tool in your movie. I would like it to stay consistent.
I think people usually knock it as a tool because if your movie's any good, you'll get the point anyways.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think there's a way to keep it and do it in a smart way, because really what that whole scene is an expression of her persona. And I think in a lot of ways it's supposed to be a fantastical idea of who she is and not necessarily happening. But the way that it's filmed, rendered, I don't know. This is not my preferred medium or my medium of education. But the way it's represented is it seems like it's supposed to be real. What I think would be really interesting and a better thematic through line would be to have all of those images and then like a snap or like a jolt, and we realize that she's been writing in her comic book the whole time and drawing those things. And so all of like her perception of herself in the world is really right here in these drawings. And all of those are just representations of her persona within herself.
No, I like that idea a lot, because then it even makes the notebook more important later on, where her mom finds
Right.
it, and like, you know, she's under the bed, and it's like her own space to be herself. So
Yeah.
I actually like that idea a lot. If you use that as a tool to spell out who the character is,
Yeah.
that's a great change that I agree with. I would make.
Yeah.
Is there an anime that breaks the fourth wall? Like, is there another anime that could have been taken inspiration from for this movie? I can't think of one.
Gintama breaks the fourth wall a lot.
Could it? I don't know what that anime is about. Could you have used techniques in that to incorporate into this, or is it a different kind of fourth wall break for like humor?
It's for humor specifically. Yeah, that show, honestly, it's one of the funniest shows I've ever watched, Gintama. But yeah, it's even like a lot of the references actually come through even like with the cultural differences. It's it's more than just slapstick, which is a lot of Japanese humor, is slapstick in general.
Like someone falling over and everyone makes a face.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Gintama is a really smart comedy that also uses slapstick, and it's funny. I don't really know if there's specifically something anime that I've seen that would do that. But I feel like I would have the same issue, or like a lot of anime is not really high-minded. So that's kind of the problem, is no anime is really doing anything better than what Turning Red is. So
Interesting. Okay. Were you guys not upset that in this whole movie there was not like a single bloody nose? Like in anime, that's like such a common trope.
I really hate that, because it's so much to do with fan service
Yeah, I
and like
know.
the objectification of women.
Yeah.
That was a big part of why I couldn't deal with anime anymore. It's like I just felt like so gross about myself, and that like being the point of some shows. Like
Right.
I kind of like this plot of this show, but like every character has like giant boobs, tiny waist, and like, oh no, I'm stuck and in a sexual situation. What am I gonna do? Male hero of no renown.
Of no
Yeah.
renown.
I do feel like the influence that is in this movie is just right. It's not too much. I think you could
Oh,
dial
for
it up
sure,
more,
yeah.
and like Calvin said, you could appeal to more of those kinds of fans.
Yeah, if
And
there
I'm
was a
glad
bloody
it's
nose,
not. Yeah.
it would have been a mistake for sure. I was hoping the whole time. I was like,
Exactly. Like,
give me a bloody nose, please.
right, and I think the right amount of implication of blood is here in Turning Red. So let's continue a discussion we've had with other Pixar movies of them being folktales. Everyone who's listened to this podcast knows I bring up Carl Jung a lot, so we're about to hop on the Jung train.
Yay. I was so excited when I was going through your notes, and there was talk of Carl Jung, because I feel like I haven't gotten to press the button in a while, so I'm very excited.
I know, right? Yeah, we really ought to upload some more sound bites just so you can use the pad.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Carl Jung, renowned Swiss psychoanalyst, contemporary of Freud, he viewed stories as expressions of a subconscious, including like especially folk tales. And so that's why I think this is a good way, like Pixar movies being folk tales, is there you can think of all of the characters as being expressions of the main character's subconscious, and they all exist within her mind in terms of the issues that she's going through. And I think here especially, like the red panda is the shadow self. I mean, that's part of the subconscious that you literally hide away from everyone. Like she has this persona, which we talk about at the beginning of the movie. I'm Mei Lin. I love math, and I don't give up about what anybody else thinks.
Right.
I'm sure, yeah, our streak of cursing in Pixar movies has not been great, so I'm going to break that. And then you have all of these things that she can't show her mother, and then all of a sudden they literally manifest as the red panda. Her anger, her embarrassment, her crush on Devin when she walks by and goes awooga. You know? That one was a little over the top, but still funny.
I liked it for the reason that we usually see it from a male character gawking over a woman. So
Yeah.
I again, it's nice to have a movie that it gets rid of some of these stigmas that, like, oh, women don't look at men that way, like women don't have these kinds of feelings. Like, they do. Like,
Yeah.
women are attracted to people. It happens. And so I like the idea that, she makes a face and is into him
and
I thought-
oogling him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so exactly. So that's what the panda is it's a representation of this part of herself that she can't share with other people. And that's why this is such a good movie, is because if you really want to get past this idea of shame and guilt that so many people carry around, that's what we usually put into the shadow. The shadow is things that we don't want people to know, the things we're most embarrassed about. But what Carl Jung talked about was this idea of psychic equilibrium and balancing all the parts of the subconscious into the true self. And that's what this movie does in such a great way, is, you acknowledge your shadow self and incorporate it in the right ways, because she allows the shadow self to go crazy and it hurts people. That's why people are afraid of their shadows, because it will isolate them and break off their relationships, just like how Ming hurt her mother when her mother didn't approve of her marriage to May's father. So incorporating that part into your persona and then balancing those is the best way to reach individuation. And that's why this is such a great story to put into kids and to spell it out. Like, there are parts of you that are messy and weird, and you have to acknowledge them and incorporate them, because putting them away, locking them away in a pendant it drives the barriers that exist between all of the other relationships and the characters. Like, Ming and May have never talked about Ming's panda, because, like, oh no, that's sealed away. That's not something we talk about.
Yeah.
And that is part of the barrier between their relationship.
No, I agree. And I think that after doing this podcast with you for a while, there are certainly concepts you bring up, and it feels like the shadow self is one that I'm like, oh man, I feel like I don't get it. I've gotten a grasp on it a lot more. But I think that if you want to have a movie that really kind of spells it out, this is a great way to, like, educate yourself on, like, that way of thinking and interpreting what a shadow self is, and how do you, like you said, how do you reach individuation? Mm-hmm. I think this is if you're like a starting film student, you don't understand Jung, this would be a great way to get a grasp on it, I think.
Yeah. Because I think Enemy might be the hardest example to start with.
And that's what we talked about not too long
But that's
ago.
one of my favorite representations of the shadow self in film. Also Black Swan, obviously, The Lighthouse. I mean, it's the shadow self is such a prevalent icon in storytelling that we just don't realize. We don't understand it's happening. But it's the way we choose to represent these things in stories to understand what's going on within one person's mind in a really interesting and novel way. And this, being in a kid's movie, is perfect. It's not puberty. It's not your period. It's this whole collection of things that you don't want people to know.
Yeah, so one of the controversies I had come across researching this is that it's too specific for its audience, for a general audience, which I think is, again, really shallow. I mean, like I said, I was never a teenage girl, but I certainly had moments in my life growing up where I felt like enraged or out of control, and I acted out. And so this movie, yeah, it certainly deals with that topic, but it's not specific, like you said, to a period. And that's why I think it's a really shallow take on it, and it makes me feel like you didn't really take the time to watch the movie. You just had an opinion already, and you were just itching to write your article, tearing it up.
Can't the panda be a symbol of both the shadow self and a symbol for puberty?
Yeah, it is. That's the whole point.
It sounded like you said it like flat out is not puberty, and it's actually deeper than that. It's the shadow self. That's what I got from what you said.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If I misspoke then, I was just more saying, like, it is not just that.
Okay.
And trying to be, But yeah, you're exactly right. It incorporates so many things.
Because I think for part of the movie, it is obviously like a symbol of puberty and how she runs home from school after she turns into a panda, and she's like crying, and she's like in her room curled up in a ball, and it's like, oh my God, it's like when I had my first period or whatever,
Yeah.
Not that I have, but.
And it's also it's like you don't really get the space to say, oh, excuse me, I need to go call my mom because my vagina's bleeding. Sorry, I don't know if I should say vagina.
That's anatomically correct.
We've said worse.
Exactly. So yeah, and that part was so sad when she was crying herself to sleep as the panda, and it was really cute.
Which I thought they did a good job at, because like Connor, I've never been a teenage girl before, but I imagine it's devastating in some ways when you're changing. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, in some ways it's also obviously the shadow self. But yeah, I think it's both. Absolutely.
Yeah, the panda represents much more than puberty.
It's more than just a panda.
Yeah.
In fact, I mean, really, it's beyond the shadow self. Really, what we should have on this podcast is the panda archetype.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
I agree.
There it is.
that'll be what we use when we talk about characters who are girls going through changes.
But also, it could be anybody who, is having problems with their parents.
That's why I think.
Right.
Yeah, that's why I think this movie it is not too specific for its audience because like I still feel like I got something out of it. I didn't go through those specific events, but I definitely feel like growing up there's like all kinds of trouble and turmoil you go through. So I think the take that this is too specific for a general audience is a bad one. I think it's definitely going to impact certain people more than it will others. But I think that's true of any Pixar movie. They all seem to hit a certain audience a lot heavier than it will other audiences. Like Onward is one that I really connected with because I feel like it genuinely told like part of my story growing up where I was really close to my older brother and I looked to him as a father figure. Whereas for other people, there are definitely elements of that movie you can take from and enjoy and see yourself in, but that part of the movie might not impact them as much. And I think Turning Red is the same way. I still took portions of the movie and got something out of it, even though that specific story has never happened to me.
Yeah, and I think that's really the case with film in general. Why I love movies and film and specifically is because of the visual medium, but it's stories in general. How a work resonates with us depends on the context. It depends on whether we were in a good mood watching Requiem for a Dream, whether we've had drugs before, whether we're on drugs when we watch the movie.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it's contextual to our periods of life. Like you saying, like you didn't like Requiem for a Dream when you first saw it, and then coming back and it's like, oh, this is different. When you see something in it's a mood of the day. This is the major events going on in my life right now. This is my world outlook. Those things all impact the way we absorb these stories. And so you're always going to, everything's going to resonate with someone differently at a different time. And I think it is strange that people would call this limiting when we really think about a lot of the American classics, like take Sandlot. I mean, that's a movie that basically is just about a boy and his friends. It's the same exact thing,
right.
But that was never written as like, oh, this is too specific.
I'd love to see an article like if that came out now, like it was contemporary. Like would it be criticized the same way that Turning Red is? I doubt it.
I would hope so though, because it's the exact same thing.
Right.
Like if you think of a creator, a lot of times they just make movies from themselves, from their experiences and all of their memories. So if like this was a really big story to them, then they would have made that story. And what makes stories great is how the principles and the experiences are universal. And that's again like what's happening with Pixar movies is all of these experiences are universal, and whether they're happening in a fish or an anthropomorphic toy or an anthropomorphic robot or an anthropomorphic car or just a human. The reason that these things are relatable is because what we're putting into them are human. So it doesn't matter who's actually going through the actions.
Right. So I talked about how the criticisms were that this movie is too specific. I also found another one, which is totally in contrast to it, is that it generalizes the experience of a teenage girl. It is showing that every girl goes through the same thing at this stage in life. They're concerned with boys the same way. They deal with their emotions the same way. They have conflict with their mothers in the same way. So I'm confused how you can have two opposing criticisms of this.
Do people who review movies expect the movie maker to show every possible way you could interact with the situation?
Yeah, especially because, like I said before, the director said like this is a story. This is her story. She just wanted to put it out in a more fantastic way. Like this was her experience growing up.
Right.
So of course it's drawn from like her own experience. And if that's how she experienced it, then that's the story that's going to get put out. I just think it's really, again, I'm just going to keep saying this. It's a really shallow take. It makes me feel like you didn't really pay attention and you didn't really grab onto the message of this. It makes me feel like you had a criticism already built up and you were just waiting for your chance to lash out and explain why this movie's wrong.
It also makes me think of like the Goosebumps Choose Your Own Adventure. Like you start the movie, do you want to be a boy or a girl? do you decide to get mad at your mom
love that, yeah.
or not get mad at your mom? And like,
be great.
what do you do?
Like a Bandersnatch version of this movie.
Yeah.
You make choices throughout. What an insane experiment that was. So keeping in line with some of the criticism and controversy surrounding this movie, which is so odd to me because it's just a lovely little story. I don't understand how it kind of blew up and became so controversial. But one of the aspects of it is apparently at Disney's behest, any kind of gay interactions were removed from the film. And this is in the same time where Disney had donated money to like pro-LGBTQ communities in Florida that are dealing with that "Don't Say Gay" bill right now. And so Pixar employees put out a letter saying they were concerned that gay affection was removed from the movie at the company's behest, even though they think that telling a story like this helps discourage or eliminate this like discriminatory legislation like this. And so the fact that they were donating money to these communities and groups that were against this like "Don't Say Gay" bill, but then they weren't even allowed to create their own content that would help that out. I think that's like really interesting. It's kind of like saying one thing and doing another, or I suppose it's doing one thing and saying another, you know, donating this money, but then also not allowing your content to have anything that would support it. And so I think that the employees of Pixar have a really good point. They should be concerned.
Yeah, it's interesting that I feel like the best way of changing attitudes is through culture. And like we've said before, Pixar is probably integral to child culture. So
absolutely.
Why, yeah, you would be doing more to just include a few bits about like gay characters in their experience in a Pixar movie than the performative corporate act of donating to a pro-LGBTQ group.
Yeah, I think that it's problematic to, on the outside, show that you want this change, and then internally you're not allowing that to happen.
And because you're more worried about the dollar bills, although they just gave away dollar bills for, I don't know. It's very strange how they're doing the math.
But like I mentioned earlier, I think any media that starts to remove like really silly stigmas is valuable. And so if you can add more LGBTQ representation and enfranchise more people, I think that's important. And so I don't like the idea of modifying your film in a way that doesn't speak to the other actions that you've done. So I would like to see more stigma removed. This movie did a good job of that. I think it could have gone better. And the idea that the fact that it was Disney itself that like limited that, even though the producers and the studio and the artists behind the film were all for it, and the fact that it was removed, I think, is a shame. Mm-hmm. So the next question I have for you guys is the idea of this introduction of generational trauma. It's the idea that something that's happened to either your parents or grandparents, that trauma is then transferred to you. Like if you had a parent that was an alcoholic or abused drugs, you have a predisposition to that. You're more at risk for that kind of behavior, and that's this generational trauma passing down. I think that it's represented well in this too. It's this what they describe it as an inconvenience, the panda and their family. And I think that is a portrayal of this generational trauma. It's something that is passed down from generation to generation, and each person needs to figure out how to deal with it differently. So I like that being brought up. I don't think it's done in a clever, fun way.
Yeah, and I think it's also universal. Again, It's not necessarily just the immigrant experience. It's the same idea of like this old world idea of we don't talk about real things. You hold all of that in. And that causes so many issues with generational relationships.
But it did seem like this initially was a gift, and then they turned it into this inconvenience,
right?
When they had to kind of change how they acted and interacted with other people, all of a sudden it's no longer something that they can show or use anymore. But it was really interesting that Malin could use it. She figured out how to use it, but no one else was ready to change at the end.
I do like the idea it's like traditions have to change over time because they just aren't applicable. They're not keeping up with the change in the world. Mm-hmm. So I think it's cool how it's introduced as this was like it was like powerful for them to have it, and it was useful. And now in the modern world, it just doesn't fit at all. Mm-hmm. And the idea that May can end up utilizing it, I think it's a good use. It's a good way to portray like her evolution as a character. Mm-hmm. So there's also a really extreme exorcism scene. I think I was not expecting it. It was, I mean, not graphic or anything or gratuitous, but I was not expecting it to be such a spectacle. And I think it ends up leading to May discovering who she is and how she's going to operate moving forward, this discovery of herself when she chooses to keep the panda. And it made me think a lot about second-generation immigrants, where you need to kind of hold true to some of the traditions of your family and the traditions that they hold close, but then you also need to assimilate into a new culture. In this case, she's a Chinese second-generation immigrant who needs to also operate in Toronto. And so I like the idea of the panda being this representation of her way of moving forward. Like she's going to keep some of the tradition, but then she's also going to go and see Fort Town with her friends. Mm-hmm. The panda represents so much more than, a puberty. It is really like a sense of finding herself as well. So I like the idea of kind of playing around with how do people who are second generation immigrants, how do they move forward in the new society they're in? How do they assimilate while also holding true to like old ties?
Yeah, because a lot of it too is about not having your parents control you, not having all of those things be the only narrative, but also still honoring them. It's like learning how to honor your parents and yourself at the same time.
Right.
So that's a cool thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how they incorporate the idea of the shadow into the same thing. That it's not just within a single person's mind, but it's the ties that we have to other people as well. And that's kind of the idea of the subconscious too, is that it's universal and we all kind of pull from it. It's a universal experience of the same phenomena.
So let's get into some of our favorite parts of the movie. I feel like we've like really analyzed this probably deeper than most people will. So just what was fun to you guys? I liked a lot of the lines. I love when May's mom she's like, look at those, you like looking at those glittering teens and their gyrations.
Yeah, that was so funny.
It's great.
One of my favorite lines was when the friends came into Maylin's room as she was a panda and they were like in shock that she was a panda. They were trying to convince her to go to the concert and Maylin was... she said, "No, go become women without me." I was like, that's a really out of place line for a Pixar movie, I think, but I thought that was really funny.
Right.
Yeah, but I think within like the context of what of a child thinks, like I'm going to my first adult concert.
Yeah,
like it is a rite of passage to them. That's a little less sexual than the way we would normally take that line.
Right. One of the other lines in the same scene is, "This isn't just a concert; it's our first step to womanhood." Yeah, that's hilarious to me.
It's very funny because that is everything, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, seeing Aaron Carter live.
Well, like they said, they get these fantasies. Like, I remember those things. If only I'm close enough or in the same room as this person, they will obviously fall in love with me. Like, why not? I'm not going to say anything or look at them or talk to them, and I'm probably going to leave immediately, but they're going to fall in love with me, right? Like, in real life, you're not going to do anything.
Yeah.
I love the part with Priya says she won't go to the concert. That way they have the money for the tickets. And they're like, no, so-and-so's your soulmate. You have to go.
Yeah.
Like,
there's no way.
Like they believe that themselves. I thought was so funny. And then what Abby's talking about going to the concert. And she's like, my mom says it's stripper music. I was not expecting to hear a joke like that. And
Yeah.
it seemed a little, I mean, it's funny for like adults who watch it, but I think it probably flew over the heads of most kids, but I wasn't expecting to hear a line like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know if any part was really as funny to me as when she was rolling under the bed drawing.
Yeah.
I think that was great. And then when her mom finds it and just making all the faces like, what are you doing to that?
Yeah, I think my favorite actual scene of the movie was when she's running on the rooftops, turning into a panda over and over, because that was so anime, the way that they did the animation and the effects.
I liked that a lot. And it made her become like, you're like, oh, you can do this.
Yeah.
Like you have control over
Like,
it.
oh, you're a superhero now.
Yeah, and now you like get really cool.
Yeah.
Or like accepting the two parts of herself, like she can be the panda and like her as a
Harmony.
person,
Yeah.
and they can combine to do something great.
Yeah.
While I was watching it, all I could think of was like, this would make a sick platforming game. Just like the double jumps and the poofs and everything. I was like, oh, this would be a great side scroller or something like that.
I also love the hustle. They're just like, yeah, let's make money off of this.
Yeah, it's great.
Which is what kids would think.
My wife, while we were watching that, my wife was like, wouldn't the kids talk about it to their parents? And wouldn't Mei Lin's parents find out about this? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. This would never work. Yeah.
Did you guys think it was odd that after the party, when May freaks out on Tyler, all of a sudden his parents are there, and he's lambasting May's mom, being like, how could you do this? Like, you almost killed my son.
Apparently the parents were there the whole time.
Yeah, I was so confused by that. I was like, wouldn't they have noticed the panda the whole time? So I'm not sure how the continuity of that scene worked. it was so odd to me that the parents were there.
I think the parents were there the whole time. Otherwise, it would have shown a scene of the parents driving up in their car, which they didn't. So
They probably weren't paying attention. I always think of it like, oh, it's the first teen party. Like, we're here, but we're not gonna.
we'll stay upstairs.
And it seemed like he was a wealthy family. Like, he was just like, Mom, Dad, this is what I want. It also seemed like no one had any sort of issue with her turning. There was no shock factor like, oh, you're a panda. Like, they were just like, oh, that's cool.
Well, these kids are from the
So,
school, and they've seen
yeah,
her do it
they
100
know.
times.
Yeah. Although I think it is interesting that the first time any of them saw them, they were like, "Oh my god, that's the cutest thing I've ever
Right.
seen."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not terrifying in the
Like,
slightest.
how did you turn into a panda?
What if she wasn't a giant panda and she was like the same size as Maylin, like a teenage girl, not like an 8-foot panda? Because that would be, I mean, an 8-foot panda is still really cute, but like a smaller panda would be just as cute.
Yeah.
I think regular sized red pandas are very cute.
For sure, but those would be like a lot smaller than Maylin. So what if it was just Maylin sized?
I feel like then it's not as inconvenient, right? I think the size is
She
part
can
of the
stay a panda.
inconvenience. Yeah.
Okay, so that's like some women have like stronger periods. And those
Yes.
ones are-
That's yeah.
Ming had a very strong,
exactly
heavy
yeah.
flow.
Yeah, exactly.
Katya, did you find that like offensive at all? Like the idea of, I think it's not as prevalent now, but I know there's plenty of people like, oh, you're just PMSing, like you're just mad. And I hate that. And I think that the movie was trying to kind of make that point that, you know, some people are more angry at that time than others.
Yeah. I don't hate it. I think when people just use that as, oh, she's PMSing and it's like a write-off,
Right.
that's a problem. But I've definitely noticed, like, the more I've paid attention, the more I do have moments like a really sad day or a day that I get really irritated. And so, like, those things can be super inconvenient when you're like, okay, I'm reacting to this situation in a way I normally would not react, but it means so much to me right now. So I think it's really cool because when you start to pay attention to it, it tells you a lot about other things that are going on that, like, yeah, they just bubble up. They're bubbling up more than usual.
Right.
So you can actually figure out, like, a lot of true things during that time if you're paying attention and not really just being mad at everybody. But some people are just in pain and angry.
Right.
So I think it happens. It's a fact. But how you decide to, other people telling you, like, that's what's happening, that's why they're not going to listen to you, that's a problem. But also other people saying, oh, I'm aware this is happening to you right now, I'm going to treat you appropriately.
Yeah, I think there's an empathetic way to
Yeah.
react and not just like you said, write it off. Be like, oh, she's just mad
Yeah.
because of this. So
But and it's hard too as to hear that too, to say, like, for someone to say, are you PMSing? Like, do I need to maybe talk to you differently?
Right.
And then you might be like, oh yeah, you do, or like, no, of course not.
Right.
You know?
Well, and then I think the other idea too that is like offensive to me is when someone is not on their period and they get angry and the explanation is like, oh, you must just be PMSing.
Yeah, I
And
think that bothers
that's-
me way more.
I think that is really rude.
Yeah,
And it's
like-
really dismissive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's almost to suggest that your reaction is not valid. It's made worse because it's hormonal and it's womanhood.
Right.
And not because that what I have done. It's not that I have transgressed this badly. It's that your reaction is so out of proportion to what I've done that it's your fault.
No, I think I was really excited that you were going to be on. It's the first time we've had a woman's perspective
Oh,
on, and I think it's a great movie to have you on for. I think we can all try to be as empathetic as possible, but at the end of the day, it's usually just me and Calvin, 30-year-old
Yeah.
dudes, trying to interpret, a movie that deals with an issue that a woman goes through.
You had
So,
menstruation.
yeah.
It happens.
I asked Lenina while we were watching this, I was like, what if this was a movie about like a boy going through puberty instead of a woman? Mm-hmm. Would that be watchable? Would that be...
Isn't that just Big Mouth?
Oh my god,
Oh gosh, that movie sucks.
I can't stand that show.
Yeah.
But a movie like that would probably be fine, right?
I mean, don't we have coming of age stories of young boys already? I mean,
Where like the boy gets excited and he turns into a giant bear instead of a
maybe not.
fluffy
in-
red panda.
Yeah, isn't that Brother Bear?
No.
I don't know. That's a good question though, because it seems like it could be. I don't know. It's just so much more unexpected, or for a woman to be like Ming, to get so big and mean,
Sure.
and then to watch a boy do that, you're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
boys are crazy.
Yeah, no,
So
I get
That's
that.
like,
just boys, yeah.
yeah, exactly. It would feel different to have them turn into an animal like this. It'd be
Yeah.
more interesting to have them like turn into like a lizard or a fish or something, like
Yeah.
really powerless.
Sure. Whenever I watch movies like this, I try to think like, what if it was a gender swap or something? Like, would it still be just as good, or would it be worse, or what would need to change for it to work? Stuff like that. So
No, and you said it kind of nonchalant. You're like, oh, that's just boys. But that's a phrase like, oh, boys will be boys.
Exactly,
And it just dismisses any consequence that a young man has for their actions. And so I think I kind of would like a version of this maybe where, or a different story where maybe it does follow a boy and they maybe need to take responsibility for acting out. Because I feel like, again, it's a common thing in society, just be like, well, that's just how boys are. They just objectify and that's it.
Yeah.
And there's no consequence, or they're not rebuked for it. So I think a version of this story in that way. But I think that it's more important to tell a story from a 13-year-old girl's point of view, because those stories are underrepresented.
I think I asked the same question when we talked about Inside Out. Like, what if Riley was a boy instead? And how would the emotions in her head be different if it was a boy character instead? Just an interesting thought to have.
No, I appreciate the question.
Yeah, because I think we talked about that. I think it would be, I don't think that joy would be the driving factor or the driving emotion.
It would be discussed. Yeah.
It'd be one of the other ones, because boys are not supposed to show joy or happiness because that's the most vulnerable emotion.
That's not the first thought you think attributed to a boy. Yeah.
Right. And so I feel like that would be a really interesting story to tell. But yeah, I don't mind the fact that a lot of Pixar's movies are focused on women because they're already just underrepresented. So who cares if this little cut of movie history is disproportionate, because I think this is the second woman with red hair that they've had in a Pixar movie because of Brave.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just feel like that these things are necessary, and whether or not your whole catalog needs to be balanced, I think that's missing the whole history of movies and stories in the first place.
Or the idea that you just need to keep making the same movie over and over again, like staying in that status quo, I think is boring, and I think it's not a good use of the medium. So telling new stories and doing different things is much more important to me, whether they're received well or for whatever reason are as criticized as Turning Red was for, again, what I thought was just a lovely little movie. Let's move on to how this film closes out. We've gotten the battle, between mother and daughter, and they end up in this spirit realm. And McKenna, I know you have opinions on this.
I do, yeah.
Why this didn't seem to? You don't think it earned the emotion that was built into the scene?
Nope, I don't think it landed very well. So the problem I had with this movie is it tried to draw parallels to Maylin's mom's relationship with her grandma, with the relationship that Maylin has with her mom, which I believe are different relationships. So when they get to the spirit realm, and Maylin sees her mother at like a young age, and she's like sobbing because she's trying to please her mother, and it's like really difficult for the mom to do, so she's sobbing about it, and Maylin's there to comfort her. What I think that they're trying to do with this movie is draw the relationship between Maylin's relationship with her mom and the mom's relationship with the grandma. And Maylin's there to comfort her because Maylin has learned throughout the movie that it's okay to not please everyone all the time, which I think fails. Because from the beginning of the movie, when there's a fourth wall break and Maylin's got her little montage about how she don't take no nonsense from no one, and she tries to like get straight A's and be the perfect daughter, the mom and the dad, I think that she is the perfect daughter. They're pleased with her. She doesn't have a struggle or a difficulty trying to be the perfect daughter because she wants to be the perfect daughter. And as far as everyone's concerned, she is the perfect daughter. Whereas the mom wanted to be the perfect daughter for the grandma, but she struggles to do it because the grandma doesn't think that she's good enough. And that's why I don't think the relationship is a good comparison to each other. So that finale with Maylin trying to comfort Maylin's mom didn't land for me.
Does the grandmother think that her daughter isn't living up to expectations, or is it just, I thought it was just the mother felt like she wasn't living up to expectations. I didn't think that she was being talked down to or being treated as she wasn't good enough.
Well, Maylin's mom doesn't think that she's good enough.
Yeah, because she's like, no, you can't do the ritual by yourself. We'll be there. She has no faith in her whatsoever. And Ming's reaction to her grandmother calling, she's like, how dare she treat her mother this way, talking about May. And then he answers the phone. It's like, oh, it's your mother. I'm not here. And it's just like a completely like it's in one breath how she's so hypocritical about that relationship. I think I understand what you're saying is Maylin does want to be good and doesn't really struggle with it until she gets the panda. I don't know. I feel like, yeah, it did kind of come out of nowhere. It was kind of strange, especially to see her as a young girl. But I think it's just a universal thing. Like, I'm not going to be the one. The expectation my parents have of me is not who I am. Mm-hmm. I think if you boil it down to that, then they are the same. But there are nuances between Maylin and Ming and her mom.
I think if they wanted to make the correlation between the two characters by the end of the movie, they should have hammed it up more about how Maylin is struggling to meet her mom's approval, which didn't really come across to me in the movie.
Yeah, I think the only place, she got like a B or something.
Oh, there's C's down there.
She got C's.
Like she started doing more poorly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there was like a heroin needle to the head. Oh my God.
Or it's not Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah. But,
Requiem for a Ming.
yeah. But like there wasn't much. Like when Maylin was struggling, it was because of the panda. It wasn't because like.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's implied like, what will my mom think about this? But I didn't think it was. It wasn't told to me, so I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a fault on my own.
No, I can see where you're coming from. I wasn't expecting you to sway me. I thought that you were just going to be outright wrong. But I think you're kind of right. The movie kind of plays it up as more of a one-to-one comparison at the end, even though May and her mother went through different paths growing up, and they were treated differently by their parents. I think the expectation of like excellence is still there, just the way they deal with it and the way they go through it personally. May's mother seems to be really stressed, and it's affecting her, physically and mentally, whereas May, like you said, seems to enjoy and take pride in like honoring her parents in that way and being that kind of person. Mm-hmm. So I can agree with that if you're going to have that emotional moment at the end, it needs to be more of a one-to-one comparison. But then I also kind of agree with Calvin that we don't all need to go through the exact same moment to need the same kind of emotional support.
Sure.
So I think that the idea that it is universal still works for me. Mm-hmm. So the scene itself is not, I don't have a problem with, and I don't think it's built in the wrong way. I just think that, to your point, it might impact better if it's one-to-one.
Yeah, I think they could easily make it impact more if they had one less scene of Maylin interacting with the panda and how it affects her, and instead had how does this panda affect the relationship with my mom?
Right.
Yeah.
If they just had one of those, I think it would have gone a long way.
Yeah, because I think they're counting on the idea that everyone has this panda. That is the universal baggage between these intergenerational relationships.
Because if the panda is the shadow self and the shadow self affects all these relationships in our lives, there really should be a scene about all these emotions I have within me, all these feelings I have, all these thoughts that I have. They impact every relationship that I have.
Yeah, good and bad.
Right.
Yeah.
But they really only focus on how the shadow self impacts Maylin herself. So.
And was the mom, so were those her aunts?
Yeah.
All the other people?
Yeah.
So the mom grew up with sisters
Yes.
Or, yeah.
or something. Yeah.
They don't actually say, which is frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like the aunties. I don't
Yeah.
know if they were like really aunties or just all the relatives.
Yeah.
So probably the most important question, and I have this for Calvin. What did you think of the food in this? You're a big food guy. I thought it looked great.
Oh, I know, right? Yeah, I love how they included bao buns
Yeah.
in like the beginning. Like that was great. Yeah,
Because she directed that short as well.
right.
Right.
Yeah, and they invited the friends at the end, which I
Yeah.
really liked. They're like, will you come for dinner? And like that seemed to be the first time they were
Right.
invited to dinner.
There was it was just the one single like food montage with the father, right?
Right.
That was so strange to me. The father, I think, has like 2 lines in this whole movie. He has that emotional speech with Maylin.
Right.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
like the only.
And then he
his
just
only
drives around the
contribution.
chalk cart.
Yeah, which is so strange because that's like one of the most important scenes in the movie. But
But,
like that's his
yeah.
only contribution.
But the story was really supposed to be, it's supposed to be about the interaction between a daughter and their mother.
It's
Like that.
about
Yeah.
other stuff, but the fact that they gave like one of the most important moments in the whole movie to the character with basically one line
Yeah.
is funny to me.
I like
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the food also looked very pretty.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just liked how it represented how important food is to the culture. And I know it's Chinese, but I had a Korean girlfriend for a while, and whenever I visited her family, it was the same thing. I mean, they just threw food on my plate like nonstop. I ate so much good Korean food, and I'm not trying to say that there's a exact comparison. I know like each kind of Asian culture is different in their own way. I don't want to generalize it like that, but I did like that representation of it because that's how it felt when I interacted with that kind of culture. I was like, oh my god, food is such a big deal.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're getting ready to wrap this one up. There are 5 members of Four Town. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you rank Turning Red?
I think I would, out of 5, I would give it a 3.8, I guess.
Oh, wow, okay.
It was okay. I guess I'm excited to watch it again. It probably won't be for a while. But like I said, there were some jokes that got me pretty good. So I'm excited to wait long enough to forget the jokes and then watch it again.
Okay.
Maybe I'll finally have my first period by the time I watch this movie again.
Oh, my God. Katya, what'd you think of this one?
Yeah, I liked it too. I thought it was funny at times, and it was a little touching at times too. So, yeah, like 3.5 boys.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I just love, my Jung psychology and stuff. But I think most folktales have that. I don't think this is particularly groundbreaking. I don't know if this is the best Pixar movie out there or anything like that, but it's certainly enjoyable, and it's fun seeing where all of the animation style is going, especially in terms of just the ability to render light and detail the way we can. So I'd give it a 3.9 out of 5.
Like I said, I was pleasantly surprised by this. I wasn't expecting a ton going into it. But like I said, I thought it had a real message. And I was surprised how deep I wanted to dive into, I brought up like my thoughts on it pertaining to second-generation immigrants and intergenerational trauma, which I think is kind of a deep dive for, a movie that's target audience is the 13-year-old. But I thought that this movie kind of deserved that. I thought it brought up a lot of things that aren't talked about as much or aren't thought about as much, and it removed some stigma for me. So I enjoyed this a lot more than I expected to. I'd put it like a 3.5.
I had a question. Would you guys like to see more movies like this in the future? Like this animated anime style of movie, or just something that we get maybe once every couple of years?
No, I'd like to see more.
Okay. You like the style?
I say once in a while.
Okay.
I'm all for anything that kind of like pushes animation or the way you tell a story in a different way.
Yeah,
So,
it's so unique.
Like Into the Spider-Verse seemed like a really cool, unique way to tell that story.
Yeah.
In its style. So I'm all for any kind of medium adapting and changing, and it's not all going to be good, but then you're going to find gems every once in a while. So I kind of like I like the blending of the two styles.
Okay.
I don't know that I certainly don't want to see every movie take on that, but I think it can be cool to change things up more often.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to see more movies like this. It was a neat combination of two different animation styles.
Right.
So.
All right, yeah. With that, we're wrapping this one up. Thanks again for being on, McKinnon.
Mm-hmm.
And Katya, great to have you as a guest.
Thank you.
And as always, thanks for being on, Calvin. And we're going to wrap this one up. You can find our podcast on any platform like Spotify or Apple Music. We also upload all these to YouTube, so go ahead, leave a comment. Tell us what we're doing well. Tell us what we're doing wrong. And if you have any suggestions for movies we should do in the future, go ahead and leave a comment. And with that, thank you for listening to Now This Is Podcasting.